To examine all of this, we are joined tonight from Washington, D.C. by Anthony Cordesman. He is with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.
A pleasure.
So the president said this weekend that he is studying his strategic options in Afghanistan before deciding whether or not to send additional troops there. What do you think his options are?
I think this is more a political statement than real. The president has appointed a new commander, a new ambassador. The actual strategic options were ready at the end of July. There are some choices in terms of the levels of troops he might commit relative to risk, but he really has only one set of options at this point. He can either provide the ambassador and the commander with the resources necessary to implement the strategy that they've requested, or given the unpopularity of the war, both in the U.S. and overseas, and the fact that we have an ongoing crisis in military terms, his choices are going to essentially be to leave or lose.
Well, some believe that a surge like the one that was used in Iraq is perhaps what might be needed to turn the tide in Afghanistan. Any reason for you to believe that something like this would work?
I think at this point, anybody on the outside trying to suggest a new strategy that no one who is in command or has any authority is going to support is pointless. The type of buildup in resources and manpower that General McChrystal and Ambassador Eikenberry have been looking at is much more limited than the surge inside Iraq. It's also focused much more on building up Afghan forces. It's focused on building up aid and civil programs and protecting the Afghan population rather than covering a large area to defeat an insurgency as in Iraq.
Do you think enough has been said about the civil side, the options that need to be considered in Afghanistan?
I think that's a very good question, because frankly, General McChrystal is trying to solve the problem of the military dimension primarily. Ambassador Eikenberry has to deal with the coordination of the civil side, which it will be as critical to the strategy General McChrystal is recommending as providing more forces, whether they're Afghan or U.S. And we need to remember that this document is completely separate from the overall resource request, which not only has to affect U.S. troops, but to decide how to fund Afghan military and police forces, how to find more civilians, what level of additional civilian aid is required, and how this strategy will be implemented over a period of years, because we're not talking about one sudden surge. We're talking about a strategy that takes years to implement.
And just very briefly, the last time you were here, you had talked about how much ground the Taliban had gained in Afghanistan just in this past year. In your view, how dire is the situation now?
I think the situation is extremely dire, and people sometimes see this as something sudden. But from 2006 to the present, the United Nations, NATO ISAF, and a whole group of outside intelligence analysts have steadily shown how the Taliban, Hekmatyar, and Haqqani network have expanded from a minor presence in the east and the south to a presence which now covers spots throughout the country and dominates a good part of the east and south.
All right, Anthony Cordesman, thank you very much.
Thank you.